So welcome everyone to Where Are My Files? When we talk about SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, and we dive into Microsoft OneDrive. One of the things that all three of these have in common is that they are all related to the cloud. Now, what exactly do we mean by being related to the cloud? Well, that means that they're available through an internet browser. So you can access your OneDrive through your Microsoft account. You can access OneDrive through Microsoft Teams. You can access OneDrive through Microsoft Outlook. You can access things from a lot of different places. I'm starting right now in an online browser. I'm using Microsoft Edge as my browser, and I had a shortcut on my screen to take me directly into a SharePoint document library. And that's going to be one of the main focuses that we're going to be discussing today when it comes to managing our files that we have within the cloud. So a couple of things to kind of start things off. SharePoint and Teams are fully connected. We can't have a team without SharePoint in the background. So when we talk about features that are related to SharePoint document libraries, the same features will be available in Microsoft Teams as well. So I will show you how they look exactly the same. Now, of course, a few months ago, they didn't look exactly the same. Teams had less features. We would have to actually open it in a SharePoint actual document library to have the full benefits. But as of today, they are identical. So managing a file in a SharePoint Teams channel on the Shared tab, which is new, we'll talk about that once we get to Teams, the features will be the exact same as if you are in a SharePoint document library. So starting out here in SharePoint, one of the things that I wanted to mention about SharePoint is the fact that SharePoint is an online application that is a website. It looks and feels like a website because of the way that they're set up, but one of the main functionalities of a SharePoint site is to actually use a document library. A document library is kind of the name of where we store and manage our files. But SharePoint is a lot more than just document management. It has a lot more that it can do. But when it comes to navigating to your document libraries, you could have a link in a lot of different places. So if you go to a SharePoint site, and like I said, it looks like a website, but a big difference between the two is going to be the fact that if I had a business website versus a SharePoint site, SharePoint is locked down to only the people that we want to give access to. A business website, of course, is available to anybody in the world. So big differences there. So just know that the files that would be in a SharePoint document library are only going to be shared with the people we give permissions to. So, of course, not everybody in the world will have access to your files. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. And then also, how do you navigate to where these files are stored at? It's going to depend on the type of site and how it was set up. One way to access a document library is to go to the menu across the top. So if I happen to be in this SharePoint site, there's a menu on the top to navigate to different parts of the SharePoint site. And one of those links at the top is called Documents. By default, every SharePoint site has a document library, has one main document library, and it's going to be called Documents. But just so you know, each SharePoint site can have more than one document library. And each document library technically can have different permissions. So I'll get to a little bit more on that here in just a moment. But this would be one way to get to a document library, is just to go to the link at the top. But also when you are in a SharePoint site, you could actually have a section with a web part that is the document library as well. Like I just scrolled down on this home page of my intranet site, and you could see I could access files directly from here as well. But some sites work a little bit differently. If I go into this site called Clinic Department, I don't have navigation across the top. The navigation is on the left-hand side, which tells me that if the navigation is on the left-hand side, it is a SharePoint team site, which means there's a team also set up in Microsoft Teams for that site. If the navigation is across the top, there isn't a team associated with the site. It is called a SharePoint communication site. Okay. I'll explain a little bit more on that when we go into Microsoft Teams. But on the left-hand side, when I'm here in this Clinic SharePoint site, you can see that I have a link on the left called Legal Documents, and I also have Documents. If I click Documents, this is going to open up a document library where everybody that has rights to this SharePoint site has rights to the files within this document library. There's a menu going across the top, which is used to help us manage the document library. But notice this also has underneath the menu, it says Documents, then it says In Channels, In Site Library. If I expand the arrow next to In Channels, I can see that I have two channels that are a part of a team within Microsoft Teams. One is called General, one is called Vaccinations. So those are the shared tabs directly in the team itself. I'll explain that a little bit more once we get to Teams, but just so you're aware, because it's a Team SharePoint site, I can access the file. It used to be called the File tab. It's now called the Shared tab. I can access those files from the Shared tab directly here on the SharePoint site because they are a SharePoint document library. Okay, so everybody that has rights to the site has rights to these folders and files. But if I go to the left-hand side and click on the document library called Legal Documents, not everybody that has rights to my SharePoint site can actually access this document library. We have it locked down with permissions to only say these people have rights to access it. So if I don't have rights to access it, I won't even see it on the menu. That's very powerful here in SharePoint, where we can have different levels of permissions. But all document libraries have the same menu options. Regardless of who has rights to the files and folders, they all work the same. So the menu going across the top is going to give you ways to add files to the document library by going to the New category. If you click the icon for New, it gives you a drop-down menu. And from that drop-down menu, you could create a new folder. You could create a new document. You could create a OneNote notebook, etc., all starting just from that menu. But to be honest, I usually don't do like a Word document or an Excel file, because what if I want to create a new Excel file to be in this document library? I would personally go to Excel. So just like you normally would work with your files, you could just go straight to your application, whether it's Word, PowerPoint, Excel, whatever. You could create the file and save it to that document library. So different ways depending on how you want to do things. So let's say that I want to save this. It's going to be my 2026 company information. And I want this to be saved in the document library. I can go to the menu at the top and click where it says Book 1, give it a name, company information, and then I'm going to choose where I want that to actually be saved. So if I wanted to go to a specific location, all I have to do is click on where I want it to be saved at. So I can choose exactly the location of where I want that to be saved, which can be my OneDrive, or it could be a SharePoint site. So I can save it to a SharePoint site, or I can save it to my OneDrive, all depending on what it is that I want. So let's say that I want to save it to that legal documents. I actually have a shortcut to my legal documents in my OneDrive. So if I go to my OneDrive, I can access that legal documents via a shortcut. Here's my folder called Legal Documents. If I open that folder, I could choose another folder inside it or simply save it right here. I'm going to keep the name, I'm going to keep it right in my legal documents, and I'm going to click OK. So one way to be able to have a file be in your SharePoint document library is to be doing it directly from your application. So you could go to Excel, you could go to Word, etc., and have a file be saved within a SharePoint document library. So now this file is saved there. I'm going to close it. I'm back into my document library on my SharePoint site, and I'm in that legal documents, and I can actually see this file that I just created through Excel, that 2026 company information. That is right here. I can see it. It's easy to get to, but I could also get to it directly back in Excel because it was a recent file. It's saved to a cloud. I will have access to that file, to this document library, directly within my application. So if your files are saved within a SharePoint document library, one way to access them is to go to an internet browser, open the SharePoint site, go to the document library. You will have access to everything in that document library. From here, you can manage that file. Okay. One way to manage that file is actually to right-click on the file itself. If you right-click a file, then it's going to give you a menu related to managing the file. Haley, did we have a question?
Hi,
Okay.
Jolene. Yes, sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. We
No
have a question
worries.
from Marlene. What is the difference between saving in SharePoint and OneDrive?
Excellent question. Now we are going to dive into this a little bit deeper, but the big part is think of the name. OneDrive. One means it's for you. It is your personal storage location, OneDrive. SharePoint is for sharing with others. Like I said, when I came into the SharePoint site, everybody that has rights to the SharePoint site has rights to the document library, unless we lock the permissions down. But with OneDrive, only you have rights to the files and folders, unless you share those files or folders, which I'll show you how to do once we go to OneDrive. Okay? Yes. Thanks. So we'll come back and talk a little bit more about what I just said. But for right now, managing the library, we go to the menu at the top. Managing a file, you could go directly to a file. Like, what if I have this file and I misspelled the name of it? You may have noticed that. I didn't fix it because I wanted to fix it during the training to show you how you could fix it. So I have this 2026 company information file. If I right-click that file, I get a pop-up menu with everything related to managing that file. Another way to access this menu, by the way, is clicking the ... menu. for more options, just so you know. But from this menu, I could delete the file. And by the way, if you delete a file, whether you're in OneDrive or you're in SharePoint, they both have a recycle bin. So your OneDrive and every SharePoint document library has a recycle bin. So you can always go to the recycle bin to recover a file that has been deleted. You get 93 days by default to go back and get a file out of the recycle bin, just so you know. But from this menu, I could delete it. I could also save it as a favorite because there's an option for a favorites folder. But Haley, did we have another question?
We do.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We have a great question. And someone missed how a shortcut is created in OneDrive for a SharePoint site. Is it possible to go
I
over that at some point again?
I haven't actually showed it yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a secret I haven't talked about yet. And it's
Perfect.
one of my
Okay,
favorites. So
great.
I'll do that here in just a moment as we talk about our menus. So back to managing the file first. When it comes to this file, you could add a shortcut to My Files to get to this specific file. That's a shortcut, but not the one I was talking about before for OneDrive. But here's a rename option. So if I want to rename that file, you could see that it's misspelled when I go in because it gives spelled. I fix the spelling of the word information, click update, and it updates the name of that file. And it put it in alphabetical order by default in the list. But if I go back to that file and do a right click again, I just want to talk about a few other great features that we have that we can use to manage a file. And another one is pin to top. If this is a file that I'm going to use regularly and I don't want to have to dig through the document library to find it, I can choose pin on top. I just pinned this file and now I can see it as an actual icon up at the top of the document library. I don't have to, kind of scroll down and find the file. It's right here. I can always go back and unpin it again if I don't want it at the top. Okay, so that's another great feature we have from right-clicking on a file name. Also, right-clicking on a file. You can edit the pin. So if I wanted to unpin it, I could do it right from that menu. If I want to move it to a different location, because maybe we have a different file that we want to, or a different document library or a different folder we want to put it in, we could do that move to. Or if you want to make a copy of it and put it someplace else in the cloud, you could do that as well. But I want to talk about a feature called version history. When you have files that you're working on, we get version history. So let's say, I'm going to kind of back up off this menu for a moment. Let's say that I don't have a file in the SharePoint document library yet. I created it over the weekend and I actually saved it to my C drive. What if I want to bring that file into the document library? If you have an existing file that's on a network drive, it's in a different place, you're a flash drive, wherever, you can bring those files into a SharePoint document library by going to the menu up at the top and clicking upload. This is going to be one way. From upload, you could choose files or an entire folder. I'm going to just do a file. So if I say file, I can then navigate to any place on my computer. So if I go to the left-hand side and I go to a specific file, I can bring in any file that I want to have available within that document library. So just so you can see, I can navigate to anything. So let's say that I go to this file. I want this Excel file. I'm going to click open. It just made a copy of that file and put it in the document library. So now I have access to that file here within the document library. So now I can work with that file and it's in the cloud, which means Once a file is in the cloud, it has the cloud capabilities like version history. A file on your network drive or a file saved to your C drive does not have the same capabilities as SharePoint or OneDrive. Both SharePoint and OneDrive have version history. So how does version history work? Well, if I go to any of my files, if I go to like this Excel dashboards file, if I right click, I can click version history. It's going to open a window of all of the different versions of this file since it came in the cloud. If it had history prior to coming into the cloud, I don't have that history. The history doesn't start until it gets in the cloud. But once it's here, you can see all these different versions of that file. You can even see some extra information like the sign-off status. Some of these have comments on the right-hand side. But if I want to go back to a previous version, like this version from November of last year, I can click on it. It's going to open that version of that file. And underneath the ribbon at the top, I will be able to see a message that says, this is the previous version. If I want to make this become the most current version, I can click Restore. So just so you know, this is an option for you to do. This is one way to do that. I can also access version history if I am directly within the application. So if I open up this file in my Excel desktop, I have access to version history. Or if I open a Word document, etc., I can access their version history. I do not have to be in the document library to access version history. Okay? Now, I'm not really going to restore it. I'm going to close that file. So I can see all these different versions of it and go back to a previous one if I needed to. I'm just going to close this window because I mentioned that everybody has access to this document library, which means anybody else can get in a file and work on it at the same time as me. But what if I want to open this file exclusively? I don't want other people to be able to access the file when I'm in there, because maybe I need to make some changes to this file to prep us for the third quarter or whatever the case might be. You have the ability of opening a file by checking it out. So you can right click on a file, go down towards the bottom, the bottom of this pop-up menu, hesitate on More, and from the cascading menu, you can choose Checkout. If you click Checkout, it's going to add a circle, a red circle next to the name of the file, so others know that you have it checked out. They know then they can't go in and make changes. They could go in and open it and see it, but they can't see what you're doing, the changes that you've made, anything like that. So let's say that you open that file back up. You open the file and you want to go in and make some changes to this. This is going to be the ABC company quarterly sales. I want to come in and I want to make some changes to this. I'm going to change the chart. I want to have a chart title that says, going into the chart title. I want it to say ABC Company Quarter 1 Sales. Just so you could see, I can make any of these changes that are necessary to the file while I have it checked out. When I'm done, I close the file. Then I need to check the file back in so that everybody else will be able to go into the file and they'll be able to see my updates. I can just hesitate my mouse on the name of the file. From there, I can click that link for check-in. So from the little window that pops up, you can just simply click check-in. When you do that, it's going to give you a window that you could type in comments if you wanted to. It's not required, but you could. And these are the comments that show up in the version history on that column on the right. So I could come in and say, I updated the information for ABC company, blah, blah, blah. I keep spelling information wrong. I don't know why. Sorry, I lost my window there for a second. I updated the ABC company information. And I click check in, and everybody else now will have access to being able to go into that file, and they will be able to see the changes that I did. But if I go back to that file, which it takes a second for it to sync back up and say I checked it back in, but if you go back into a file and go back to that version history again, the comments that were made when that file was checked out show up in that comments column on the right-hand side. So I typed in, I updated the ABC company information. So we can see that with that latest version of that file. But remember when I pointed out this sign-off status approved? How did that get there? Well, what if I have a file that I have within a document library that I need to send to my manager for approval before it gets distributed to the entire company, or before we post it on the intranet, we post it on our company website? You can send a file for review. So how we can do that, and you can see right now when you're looking at my document library, I actually have this column called sign off status. So I can see if a file is still pending approval. I can see if it was approved already or if it was rejected. I would see that as well. So I'm going to go to this file called legal descriptions. I'm going to do a right click. Then I'm going to hesitate on automate. I'm going to hesitate on flows, and it's going to give me an option here called request sign off. When I click request sign off, it opens a pane on the right-hand side of my window, which is a SharePoint workflow. We don't have to worry about creating the workflow or anything. It's already created. It's part of SharePoint document libraries. But what do we do with it? Well, we put in, who do you want to send it to? Now, I'm just going to send it to myself so you can see what happens. But of course, you normally wouldn't send a file to yourself to be approved. Then I can type in a message that I want them to see, like, please review this file, blah, 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 that kind of a thing. Then click Run Flow at the bottom. It just used 5 different programs to do that workflow. But for us, how easy was that? So let me answer Haley's question, then I'll show you how do you get that notification and how does that all work. So Haley, what's the question?
Okay, perfect. Just before I tackle the question, we're just having some problems with the SharePoint link to our own handout. So if you're having a problem, we do see you, and I do apologize that it's not working. We'll try and send those out to everyone after the session today. So I do apologize about that. As for the question, I do have 2. The first one I'll start with is from Erin. So they're asking, if I share a file that's on Teams by email, will it remain shared, and are any changes made by that person automatically saved?
If you gave them editing capabilities, the answer is yes. It will remain shared until you remove the permissions for that person. And any changes that that person makes, you and everybody else that is a part of it, that SharePoint document library, will see those changes. Okay, good
Perfect.
question.
Yeah, so would you recommend that someone sets maybe a time limit on how long it can be shared for, or remind themselves in a few weeks to turn that off?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, absolutely. You can, and that's a great feature. And let me show this while we're talking about it. Whether it's in Teams, it's in OneDrive, it's in SharePoint, it all works the same. If I go to this file and I click this share icon, it's a universal arrow icon. It opens up this window where I could email this file to someone that's not a part of it already. So if they're not a part of the SharePoint site or a part of that document library, a part of your OneDrive, you haven't shared it yet with them, you could start typing in the name of who you want to share it with. On the right-hand side, by default, The pencil icon is your menu for some permissions, but by default, if you just send it to them, they can edit. But if you want to choose can view but can't make changes, or they can't download it or make changes, download means they can't save it to their computer. But I also could come down to the bottom. So Haley just mentioned a great feature. If we go to the link settings at the bottom, it's a gears icon. If you click on that link settings, we could actually put an expiration date. So it's only the link to them is only good up to that date. So you can put in an expiration date, and or there's even a way that, sorry, well, I'm not seeing it right now, but sometimes you'll also see that you could put a password on there. Okay, so great options. Then you, of course, would click apply after you make the changes, and then you can type in a message to email the file to them, the link to the file, by just clicking send. They would get an email with the link. Otherwise, you could copy a link. And if you copy the link, then you could go and paste it wherever you want it to be available for them to get to. Okay, so I hope that helped.
Awesome, thank you. Bit of a follow-up question on that example. When you're showing that, are you emailing the file or are you emailing the link to the file? Just to clarify for someone in the chat.
Yes, it's a link to the file. So it's a link to the original file. Otherwise, you would do an attachment.
Yeah,
correct.
Exactly.
Yep, the file doesn't move out of its original location. Great questions.
Perfect. Awesome. Someone has a bit of a cool, unique question I've never seen before. If you have time for one more, Jolene.
Absolutely.
Any tips on best way to naming files? SharePoint does the beautiful thing where it adds percentages and symbols and shapes into their long links and using dashes and periods and stuff like that. Does that impact searchability, having clean links, or is there nothing we can really do about it?
Well, depending on how you're going to be searching for something, using just a word is fine. So if I name a file, because that's a great point, if we have a space in the name and you share a link to it, by default, that link is going to show the percent symbol for any of those. You can use an underscore to separate words, so it won't do that because then it's a character instead of a space. It doesn't like spaces because no spaces in a browser, because it's an actual link to a browser. So an internet browser URL is what you're sharing with them. That's why you can't have any spaces. So it's just like a website, an email address, no spaces allowed. So you can use uppercase, lowercase to help, separate words too. I wouldn't use periods, honestly. I would use either an underscore or uppercase, lowercase. Okay.
I would too. I think that sounds great. That question was from Stacy. Stacy, I hope that cleared that up and gives you some help there. One more. I'm not sure if this is specific for certain organizations or if this is an overall SharePoint setting, but does sharing with editing privileges work for people inside and outside my organization?
Only if you have rights to share outside your organization. So it is a permission level within your SharePoint. So whoever is managing your SharePoint can choose if you're allowed to share externally outside of your company, and or who can you share with outside of your company. Because we can say these domains you could share with, but these domains you can't. So it's all based on permission levels. Another great question. Boy, we've got some really good questions today. So let me continue with that request sign-off that I did. So I sent a request sign-off for a document, but I sent it to myself. Just so you know, in the meantime, back in Microsoft Teams, I got a notification on my activity at the top left. If I go to that, I can see Jolene Reen sent me a request. So on the right-hand side, it says, please approve legal descriptions. And it says, please review this file. That's what I typed in the message. And here's a link to the file that I can review it then. So once I review the file, I can come back and put in comments back to the person and click the button for reject or approve. So let's say that I reviewed the file and I think this is, change the color to ABC company blue, then send to client. I'll just make a quick, note to say, just change this and it's ready to go. Then I click either approve or reject. They get notified back. Now, how are these notifications being sent? Well, one way is they get a banner notification showing up at the bottom right of their screen. You'll also, both the sender and the receiver get these banner notifications, and you will be notified via Outlook email. So I did receive an Outlook email as well saying approve or reject this file. I also got the notification here in Microsoft Teams, and I just got a notification back letting me know the final status was approved. It notified the original sender and it updated it in the document library. Now, keep in mind, I was playing both sides of that. So I was getting extra notifications, but back in the document library, it updated the status. So it doesn't say pending, it's going to say approved for that specific file that I sent it. Here it is, the legal documents, it was approved. If I go to that file is ready to go now to be shared with other people. So these are strong features that we have that are available in any SharePoint document library. Some of these features are also available in OneDrive. But let me go back to the top of the window. The menu going across the top, which is the menu for managing the document library itself, has the icon Add Shortcut to OneDrive. That is the icon you can click on to say, I want this document library to be available in File Explorer and to be available in my OneDrive. When I go to my files in OneDrive, I have access to this SharePoint document library. So it gives me alternative ways to get to my library without going to the internet and going to my SharePoint site. Okay, so now that I have that shortcut, I could actually open it from my File Explorer, or I can open it directly within. And let me show you File Explorer here real quick. If I go to File Explorer, on the left-hand side, if I go to my OneDrive, so I'm in File Explorer, Windows File Explorer. If I go to my OneDrive on my left-hand side, these are all of my folders and files within my OneDrive. Notice that when I'm scrolling on this list, here's my legal documents right here. Here's my legal documents, that SharePoint document library shortcut. I know it's a SharePoint document library because the folder icon has that arrow with it. It's got an arrow on the folder. This marketing department is also a shortcut to a SharePoint document library. If I double click this legal documents, it's the exact same files and folders that you can see if I'm in my SharePoint document library. So here's that legal descriptions that I was just in, that Word document. But the thing is, if I right click that file right now, I'm not going to get the same SharePoint menu. I get the Windows File Explorer menu. So I don't get the same features. So if you want to use the features from SharePoint, you have to actually open it in SharePoint. Okay? Now, what about Microsoft Teams? If I go to Microsoft Teams, and Haley, did you have a question first?
I did, but I might save it for the end. It's a bit bigger.
Okay, sounds good. So if I go to Microsoft Teams and I go to Teams, so on the left-hand side, I went to Teams, and here's a list of all my teams. If I go to this accounting department team and I go to this channel called Accounts Payable, the Shared tab, which used to be called File, they just recently changed it to say Shared, is a document library. So that Shared tab is a SharePoint document library. Notice up at the top it says in library and it says in posts. So if somebody posts a file in that team, you could click in posts to see those. But in library means the SharePoint document library. So all of these files and all of these folders are in the cloud, the SharePoint document library. They have the same menu across the top. So add to shortcut to OneDrive. I can do that for a Teams shared folder. I can upload files. I can add new files. I could go to a file. Let's say that I go to this file called 2025 updates. If I right click that file, I get the same exact menu that I did when I was in the SharePoint document library. Okay, same menu. So I have my version history, I have my automate, I can pin it to the top. If I scroll down, I have my more category where I could check a file out. So I'm getting the same features. So as I go to automate, I could hesitate on flows and I could do that request sign off. So I can do exactly the same things here in Teams because it is a SharePoint document library. We can't have a team without SharePoint being behind the scenes because Teams runs on SharePoint. Teams runs on SharePoint. Okay? So just so you know, they're the same. But what about OneDrive? How is that different than SharePoint document libraries, whether I'm in SharePoint or I'm in Teams? It is just your personal storage location. Nobody else has access to it but you. But how do you get to OneDrive? Well, one way, go to the internet. If you go to the internet, log into your Microsoft account. You could then access your apps. So depending on, let me log into my Microsoft account here. Let me go back here. Oops, sorry. It wasn't working when I went there before. Where are my apps? I have way too many things in mine. Let me go to my 365. Come on, catch up with me. I could go to my apps launcher and open OneDrive directly from there. But to be honest, I never would because we can use OneDrive directly from Microsoft Teams. On the left-hand side, there's a shortcut for OneDrive. If you click on it, it's going to be the same exact look and feel that you would get if you went to the internet to your OneDrive. In the middle of the window, on the left-hand side, you're going to see that you have a create and upload, create or upload. If you click that, you could create a new folder. You could upload a file. You could upload an entire folder coming from someplace else. Or if you wanted to start a brand new file, you could choose which type of file it is that you want to create. Just like we did in SharePoint, exactly the same. But in the view that I'm in right now, I'm on the home category. On the right-hand side, I actually have access to all of my recent files, what I personally was working on. So this is a file that was coming from a SharePoint document library. I could have those shortcuts. I could have shortcuts to files that were coming from my files. This file was actually coming from the clinic SharePoint document library. So I could even get to it from here because it was something I was working on. But if I only want to see my files that are in OneDrive, you would go to the navigation on the left, click the shortcut My Files. That will show you all of your folders and all of your files that are available within OneDrive. If you had done any shortcuts to any of your folder, or I should say any of your SharePoint document libraries, they will be listed here, of course, as well, just like I showed you in File Explorer. So here's my legal documents. I know it's a shortcut because the icon on the folder. If I click legal documents, it shows me all of the same folders and files that I had when I was in that SharePoint document library. I can see them here as well. I do have a menu at the top that if I wanted to open this directly in SharePoint, I could click open in SharePoint. But if I go to a file, even though it is in SharePoint, but I'm viewing it here in OneDrive, if I right click a file, I am not going to get exactly the same features that I did when I was in SharePoint. So it is a limited menu if you're managing the file through OneDrive. So as you could see, I could delete it, I could rename it, but I'm not going to see all of my features. I do not have my automate options. My automate menu is not here. I don't have my version history. I could check the file out, but I don't get version history even. If I need some of those other benefits, those other features, I would click open in SharePoint. Then it's going to open it in the SharePoint document library where I would have full access to all of the features available. Okay? Otherwise, if you're in your files for OneDrive, so let's say that I go into a folder and let's say that I go to another folder and I want to manage a file here in OneDrive, I can go to that file and do a right click just like I did in SharePoint, but I'm only going to get the features related to OneDrive. So I could delete it. I could manage access to it if I had shared it with somebody else. I could save it to my favorites. I can rename it. I can do version history, but I don't get my automate features. I don't get checkout capabilities because those are only in SharePoint document libraries by default. Okay. Haley, did we have another question?
Yes, we have a couple rapid fire, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So OneDrive has apparently 1 terabyte available. Do you know what's available in SharePoint?
By default, it's the same. Unless your
Okay.
company has it set up differently, because it is according to your company, but that is the default for both OneDrive and SharePoint.
Okay. Excellent. Another question. Can you share from your Teams to an external partner who has Teams? I think we touched on this a bit.
Yep, same thing.
Perfect.
So if
Some
I want to
permissions.
share a file, even if it's SharePoint, Teams, or OneDrive, the share works exactly the same. First, you have to have permissions from your IT department to be able to share externally. So
Yeah.
just so you could see, I've got the same exact share icon here in OneDrive that I did in SharePoint, same exact menu. If I go back to Teams and I go to a channel, look at my files. If I go to a file here and go to the share, I get the same exact menu.
Yeah.
So it
It's
works
all
the same
connected.
everywhere. Yep.
Perfect. If I share a file with editing permission, can that person forward the file onto someone else and give them editing permission?
They could share that link by default unless you change the permissions.
Yeah. So if
So
you
let me
assign it
show you
just to
what I
that
mean.
person with by name. Okay.
Correct. So back into that share window, I forgot to mention this when we were in that. If you go to the gears icon at the bottom, this is an important thing to look at before you share it with somebody, because that was a great thing. Because if I give somebody a link, they could share that link with somebody else unless I change these permissions. So the default is anyone. So share with anyone doesn't require them to sign in, nothing. Otherwise, I could just say people within my organization. If they have the link, it's okay. Or only the people with existing access or the people I choose. You want to do people I choose to limit who's going to really have access to it. So only the people that you put in that email will have access to it. Okay, that was a good question.
Yeah, great question, and super important too, I think, for
Yes.
security and privacy. You don't want to forward a document onto the whole company sometimes, or maybe you just want it to be just your team or whatnot. So definitely important to check those and compliance, all that good stuff. Check on a regular basis.
Right.
Awesome, thank
And
you.
that really kind of takes us back to when should I use SharePoint versus OneDrive? If the file is just for me, I'm going to save it to my OneDrive. I know it's backed up. I know I have access to it from my phone, from any internet connection, etc. If it's a file that I want others to have access to, it should be in a SharePoint document library that they have permissions to. So if you want to share the file, it should be in SharePoint. If it's your file, OneDrive. Okay?
Perfect. And do you recommend that folks maybe go through SharePoint sites on a regular basis to clean it up or check on things?
Always. Yeah, we
Yeah,
can't just leave things static.
yeah.
You have to go out there and clean things up, delete things if you're not using them anymore. It's no different, especially with size limits. It's no different than saving things to your C drive, saving things to a network drive. Things do not stay forever. They shouldn't stay forever. So periodically, and by the way, there's different views. And while I'm here in OneDrive, let me just show you something real quick. On the left-hand side is a filter option called Shared. What this allows you to see is up at the top, I'm on with you. So these are files that were shared with me. If I click by you, these are the files I have shared with other people. So this is an easy way to be able to see that. It's taking a second for it to update here, but here's the files that I've shared with other people. But if somebody shares a file with me and I want to go back and open it, I don't go looking for their email. I come here and I will have the link to get into that file. Okay. Just so you're aware, left-hand side has some great options. I have this
Yeah,
quick access, which can get me into um, my previous SharePoint sites as well. So if I want to go to my clinic legal documents, I actually have that saved as quick access so I can get to it very quickly from this menu. Okay.
that's really great. Yeah.
Did you have another question come through?
One more.
Okay.
How is a SharePoint member different from a person who has access to just one or two files?
Oh, good question. So if I have access to the entire SharePoint site, I have access to everything within the SharePoint site itself. But if I just have a link to a file, I don't have a link to the whole thing. I only have a link to that one individual file. I can't get to anything else in the document library or the SharePoint site itself. Good question. Okay. And that was what we wanted to cover today with document libraries and working with your OneDrive. So Haley, I'm going to actually send it back to you to see if there's any other questions that we're going to be tackling or if you want to kind of end the session and then we can do some more Q&A.